Welcome to the Psalms with me, James Delingpole, and I'm very excited to introduce my special guest, Ysenda Maxtone Graham. This is going to be a general Psalms chat. Ysenda, I've read lots of your really good articles on, cathedral choirs, on the history of English hymns, and maybe we're going to digress into some of that as well. But let's talk about our experience of the Psalms. So I suspect that your experience of the Psalms is similar to mine in that I went to one of those traditional English prep schools and the public schools where we had, we went to chapel 7 days a week and twice on Sundays, and we would have to sing the hymns, obviously, but we'd also have psalms. And I remember thinking that they were these dreary dirges that I didn't make sense. I would have been 8 or 9 at the time when I started singing them. Didn't make any sense. I mean, I remember some phrases that are stuck in my brain, like the fowls of the air and the fishes of the sea. Was that your experience too?
I think I came across them rather later, because I came across them when I went in the sixth form, when I went to King's Canterbury, where I met, first of all, I met boys who'd been choristers at cathedrals, and they introduced me to the world of psalms. And then I started singing in the school choir, and we sang Psalms 126 to 131, that little cluster of short psalms, when the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion. And that's when I sort of fell madly in love quite late. So I didn't have your awful years of hating them, actually. I came straight to fresh and fell in love at the age of 18 and have been in love with psalms ever since.
Oh, okay. I'm glad. I mean, as you know, I'm on a mission to revive interest in the Psalms, because I think they've been slightly forgotten. I mean, unless you
absolutely. You're the first person to ever let me talk about them. I've asked whether, please, can I write about Psalms for my beloved Slightly False?
Oh, really?
They let me write about hymns, but Psalms just didn't. They just weren't interested enough. And I think they're some of the most beautiful language. I mean, the Coverdale version that we are talking about, perhaps, is one of the most beautiful bits of writing in the English language. And yes, the boys I went to school with had themselves detested psalms, or sort of found them a bit of a chore, rather like the sandwiches before the cake in the service, the cake being the anthem, and the psalms were the bread and butter you had to get through first in order to earn your lovely Victorian anthem. And they found them, had found them a bit of a chore, but then they had grown to love them. And the
tunes. I mean, even now, I'm still not. I know that psalms are meant to be sung, so my treating them as poetry rather than as songs is actually denying them their full majesty. But even now, though I'm familiar with this is a terrible confession. Even though I'm familiar with the words now, I still. Where does the music to which psalms are sung now? When was that? When did that come about? When was that written?
Anglican chant, which is my favourite, almost one of my favourite art forms, which is this very miniature thing of four chords, then 6, then 4, then 6, just 4 quarters. Purcell did write some, and some very, very good ones, but I think they came to the absolute 4 in sort of late 18th and mid 19th century, and some of the greatest psalm chants were written, and I think they match the words so beautifully, and they're often rather unknown, unfamous composers, just for example, called things like Arnold and Atkins and Parrott and Goss and Crotch, and my favourite Camage, who was an organist at York Minster, wrote the psalm chant to Psalm 22, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Da 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 da. So just absolutely simple as that, and somehow the incantatory feeling of them being sung again and again, that being sung again and again, verse after verse, I find very, very powerful.
I like the sound, even on that brief snippet. I like the sound of that psalm. Psalm 22 is one of the key ones because as you know, Christ quoted it on the cross.
My God, I see. Yes,
it's one of the prophetic psalms.
Oh, wow, that is incredible, isn't it? My heart in the midst of my body is even like melting wax. I mean, what a depiction of despair. And I feel that Coverdale himself was every man, really, every man in. I know he translated the psalms. I'm sure he put his character into them. I feel that so much of the language has an extra injection of sort of almost a mini Shakespeare in his way of using vocabulary so simply and so vividly.
I'm totally with you. And I'm biased towards things that are older. I just think that as Christianity has moved away from the original events, so it has been corrupted by the liturgy, and they've been interfered. The text has been interfered with. The politics has strayed into religion, and I just think that Coverdale, who I learned from a previous podcast with Alex Thompson, was around in the time of Henry VIII.
So
has the edge.
Yeah.
Over
yes, exactly.
the 1611 committee.
Yes, let alone the dreadful common worship one, which is this century, where it's somehow just watered down. It's all right, but they just somehow every single verse is just a little bit taken from it, a bit of the absolute majesty taken from it. I was talking to a vicar the other day who said he used to do the morning office every morning in his cathedrals where he was a canon, and they read the book of the common worship, which is a new version, and it's just utterly unmemorable. So
in the cathedrals now, I can't remember when I last went to a cathedral service.
Yeah.
Which version do they sing?
They sing the Coverdale, the proper Book of Common Prayer Psalms. This very day, on a very rainy Thursday, it is Psalm 108 is being sung in York Minster this afternoon and in Westminster Abbey. 108 being, I think it contains that marvellous verse, Judah is my lawgiver, Moab is my washpot, over Edom will I cast out my shoe. That is being sung today, typical, ordinary weekday afternoon. I mean, that's one of the gems. It is one of the gems of Britain, I feel. It's not happening in other countries. They might have Sunday psalms, but this happens every day of the week. It's sung chorally.
I was thinking
to that beautiful language. Yes,
Moab is my washpot.
Yes.
Was used by Stephen Fry, of all people, as the title of
one of his memoirs,
autobiography.
Yes, that's exactly.
He's not a Christian. He's an anti-Christian.
But he loves the words, and one can love the words and not be Christian. I mean, I'm full of doubt. I mean, I do go to church, but I'm riddled with doubt. But again, so's the psalmist. He loses his faith all the time. The psalmist. So the psalms are so in touch with our real feelings of despair, futility, nihilism sometimes, and then just sometimes swinging into absolute gratitude and belief. That's what we love. That's what we love about them.
Yes, there are some. I've noticed this, and in fact, C.S. Lewis. This is one of my bugbears. It is a recurring theme of my Psalm podcast. C.S. Lewis showed himself to me to be suspect with his book on the Psalms, a terrible book where he clearly did not warm to them or understand them. He apologizes for them, and he apologizes for for example, that wonderful technique they have where they repeat a concept in a slightly different way.
Yes, which casts new light on it. Yes, so that the sun shall not burn thee by day, neither the moon by night. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, my tongue cleaveth to the roof of my gums. So exactly, just repeating, either with a bit of an opposite or repeating the same thing in two verses. So he didn't like that. He thought it was repetitive and boring.
He thought it was one of those things that made them difficult or sort of boring even.
Because it is true that sometimes in some literature repetition is boring, isn't it? But somehow, like Old King Cole was a merry old soul and a merry old soul was he, you could say is quite boring repetition. It doesn't add much to it. But somehow in the Psalms that incantatory feeling just makes one go into a trance, which is adds to the poetry
and as you say, there's a psalm for every occasion: despair, gratitude, exultancy.
I mean, every single thing we have to do now has to be put in the context of for me, has to be put in the context of Auschwitz. People there were in utter despair. What were the Psalms? Were the Psalms helping them? Would the Psalms help you in the absolute depths of unbelievable misery? I mean, of course, they didn't actually save people at Auschwitz who got murdered nonetheless. But my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I mean, they speak more deeply than any other part of the Bible, surely.
Yes, and the martyrs are particularly fond of the Psalms as they go to their martyrdom. Apparently, Psalm 43 I've seen described as the martyr's psalm, and I was thinking, well,
yes,
yeah. I mean, it's one of the classics, but B, it's quite short, and I imagine if you're going off to be martyred, you wouldn't have time to do 119.
That's true, you really wouldn't. Nor you wouldn't to harp on about the law for 2 million verses. But exactly, I mean, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I was thinking about that. So Coverdale could have written, though I walk through the valley in the shadow of death, couldn't he? Which would have been less good. We could have written, though I walk in the shadow of death. But though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, doesn't that elevate it to this incredible image and elevate it to great poetry?
Well, he's definitely got the rhythm. It's that sort of incantatory quality that it's great to speak out. Yes, and also
simplicity of words and simplicity of language. The valley of the shadow of death. I mean, I'm sure Shakespeare must have been inspired by it. I mean, so Shakespeare born in 1564, 30 years after Miles Coverdale published his Book of Common Prayer translation. So Shakespeare would have grown up with that, and I just feel it must have educated him in the art of simplicity.
Well, you and I slightly differ on Shakespeare. I don't believe that the man from Stratford wrote any of this stuff. I think it was written by a scriptorium headed by the Earl of Oxford. But I take your point. These are all church going. I mean, you had to go to church then. It was kind of against the law.
And I disagree, because I feel Shakespeare does have a character that comes through in all the plays. And I feel Coverdale has a character, because he didn't like dogs, clearly, because dogs come across very badly in the Psalms. Deliver my soul from the sword.
Is that not?
Yeah. I mean, they didn't come across very well in the Bible, actually.
Yes, but deliver my soul from the sword, my darling, from the power of the dog.
Of the dog, yes. And dogs that grin about the city and horrible things. So I just feel it has got this sort of curmudgeonly character about it.
Surely there were dogs in the original Hebrew.
Yes, I suppose there probably were. But I really need a Hebrew scholar to tell me to what extent Coverdale sort of embellished and put his own amazing vocabulary in. I mean, the hills are full of goats, and a refuge for the goats, and the stony rocks for the conies. Marvellous.
Do you know, I'm glad you mentioned that. So Psalm 104, yeah?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I'm trying to work out. So
yes.
I've learned so far. I've learned about 20 psalms.
Yes.
And I'm trying. I've just more or less nailed Psalm 51.
Oh, that's thou shalt cleanse me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Thou shalt wash me, and I shall be whiter than
hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash
me, and I shall be whiter than snow. I mean,
whiter than snow.
That's an absolute example of the parallel half verses that just sort of echo each other, but just enhance each other. So well done. You've got it under your belt. Very good.
So I've got that one. Yeah. Well, you see, okay, so it's a difficult one. So I was wondering about whether to do Psalm 110, which is the sort of the sister psalm to Psalm 2. I was also thinking of doing Psalm 82, which is an interesting one because it's about the divine council, which Michael S. Heiser has been very interesting on, the late Michael S. Heiser.
Yes.
People speak highly of Psalm 103, but I'm thinking I love Psalm 104 because it's got all the animals in it.
Well, it's got all the lovely stony rocks of the conies, and exactly it has. It is marvellous.
So what about the bit where the lions, you know, the lions go hunting at night, and then they go to their dens in the day, and then you've got man rising to do his work. I just love this sort of, it's like if David Attenborough were good, this would be the sort of stuff that you'd, if he weren't an agent of evil.
And exactly what corresponds. I mean, to me, the idea that 7-year-olds are singing this stuff every day every morning is a hugely enriching thing for for society. They're growing up with these extraordinary images about in their minds. So please, that's why I care passionately about. That's one of the many reasons why I care about choirs. That it helps any young singer to grow up with this incredible vocabulary swirling in their head. And I know they might find it boring, but I mean, and my friend Tim at school used to change "my heart is inditing of a good matter" to "my fart is igniting with a loud clatter." That's what schoolboys did.
My fart is igniting with what? With
a loud clatter. It's meant to be a loud clatter. It's meant to be my heart is inditing of a good matter. But of course they mucked around with the words. But
of course they would.
Yeah.
Well, I now, at the time, I felt sorry for the choristers at certainly at my prep school, because we had a choir master who used to fiddle with the boys. Probably not the only prep school that had that problem.
Yeah,
and he had all
sure.
these pretty boy favourites and stuff.
Yeah, horrible.
But they used to have this incredibly demanding. I mean, this is the nature of being a chorister, isn't it? You work like a dog. Coverdale, I'm sure, would be concerned about that. Working like
yes.
But you work like a dog. You have to take all this time
early
out
mornings,
doing these.
Always early mornings. Yeah.
It's like being an oarsman, actually, at Oxford. Again, you have to go and train when everyone else is having fun.
I suppose you do.
But now, I think how wonderful to have had your voice trained from that age, so that now,
yes.
When you go to church, even if it's only at Christmas, you can actually sing properly, the
harmonies, exactly.
And
you can sight read, which is an incredible skill for life. And you have this absolute bank of stuff. If you did go to prison, you'd have so much to live on that you know by heart, both music and words. That you'd be set up for life.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, Ysenda. I from what you said earlier, it sounds like I'm sort of deeper in further down the Christian rabbit hole than you are. In that, I do think that we are approaching end times, and I do think that Christians are going to be persecuted as never before, and I do think we're going to get rounded up and executed. And I do think about maybe the reason I've been sort of picked to learn some of these psalms. I don't want to sound depressing, but is so that I can kind of remember them in prison.
Jail. Yes, I see. My goodness. Well, that's what I can't bear the Church of England shooting itself in the foot by putting itself in prison, as it were, by sort of dumbing down the amount of psalms they sing and avoiding the tricky ones and having a sort of cherry picking gentle, sweet little psalms, rather than going through the whole book and singing. I mean, there are some tricky verses, and things. At the end of Psalm 137, by the waters of Babylon, has something terrible about throwing children against the stones. And that, I think, was put in brackets, a 1928 edition of the Psalms. That was put as a possible do omit, if you like.
Right. Yes. Well, I mean, yes, remember the children of Edom and the day of Jerusalem, how they said, down with it,
even to the ground. Yeah.
O daughter of Babylon, wasted with misery. Yea, happy shall he be that rewardeth thee as thou hast served us. Blessed shall he be that taketh thy children and throweth them against the stones.
I mean, what a terrifying thing. And
so
I heard it sung,
yes, you're right.
Beautifully sung on the King's College, LP of psalms that I used to be addicted to. Absolutely, and I mean, and then they went to their Bible studies, these little choristers. So exactly, but that's part of. Again, there's a lot of vindictiveness. Actually, there is in psalms, isn't there? A lot of I hate mine enemies and make them suffer.
Well, there is, but it's kind of all in the future, isn't it?
Yes.
You never get the feeling that it's happening now. It's
always.
And
I love the self-pity. I love the self-pity. It's not sort of me self-pity in the sort of social media way. But it's sort of, we're all in this veil of misery together, and there's something marvelously purging about it and cathartic about that. We're all in this.
What have you given any thought to the trickiness of the imprecatory psalms and the dodgy line that you quote from Psalm 137?
I mean, I think, that I do understand that some are tactfully dropped, but apparently there's something called the pillar lectionary, where the Church of England does cherry pick the nice, gentle bits from the Bible, and the Psalms. And, so they don't sing the proper Psalm on the day, because every Psalm, of course, the 15th evening, of course, is my favourite evening of the month, where Psalm 78 is sung. But I think some cathedrals are slightly avoiding that and doing slightly shorter, easier ones, and safer ones, just in order not to frighten off the Japanese tourists on a Thursday afternoon in Canterbury Cathedral.
You see, that seems to me that slippery slope.
Well, that's a slippery slope.
It's a bit like rewriting Roald Dahl, so that you take out all the spiky bits.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like that. You have to take the rough with the smooth, surely. But so that's a current trend.
I mean, look, either the Psalms were written by prophetic visionaries. I mean, obviously David being the main author of them. If you're going to respond to the bits that you find comfortable, then it seems wrong to me that you're going to edit out the bits that you don't quite understand, because culturally you've been encouraged to think that we now live in this wonderful touchy-feely.
Yeah. And there's one wonderful song that just ends, and by the way, God, while you're at it, just slay mine enemies and get rid of the ones that hate me. I mean, just tucked away at the end of a lovely psalm. That's just, but it's human experience in an amazing way. So I expect, so they were sung in plain song, of course, weren't they, by the medieval, and still very much sung in plain song, A, in monasteries, B, on days when cathedral choirs are on, the boys are on holiday, or the girls, because they're mixed choirs now, are on holiday, and just the lower voices sing. And that will be happening, for example, today in Westminster Abbey, Thursday, probably half term. They'll be sung to plain song, which is also absolutely beautiful. And somebody said to me, that Lord, when Israel came out of Egypt, and the house from among the strange people, that's probably, might have been sung, that particular chant might have go back all the way to Jerusalem in BC, and it's now, and then was sung in plain song, and now has become a part of the Anglican chant. So there's an incredible thread of music going back.
That's really interesting, because I've often wondered this. How can we possibly know how people sang them 1,000 or 2,000, well, longer. I mean, these 1,000, some of them are 1,000 BC, aren't they? So
yes, I mean, I'd love to know that. I don't know that. I'd love to know about that. And I suppose we just can't know. I suppose from the very early days of medieval plain song, we can know. And that, I mean, to me, I love that. And of course, they have that strange thing of having, so that between the end of the verse and the beginning of the next verse is quite a short gap, but in the middle of the verse, there's a long gap. So, almost, there's a sort of 4-second gap in the middle of verses in plain song, which is somehow, again, very beautiful. I don't quite understand why, but go to any Benedictine monastery and you'll hear that.
So what happens in the 4-second gap? There's just
nothing, silence. Yes, exactly. Yes. Which is part of the monastic way of doing things. I think, is it time to say a Hail Mary in the middle of that? I thought that actually I really would like to know the reason for that, because I found that fascinating and really rather beautiful too. Whereas in the Anglican chant, there isn't. There's just a little colon, isn't there? And then you just go straight over to the next half.
Okay. So what do you know about plain song, plain chant?
I mean, I just know that it is set to these 4-line staves, isn't it, rather than 5 lines with little diamond-shaped square notes, and they are very, very old. Very old, and probably less ornate, and they're not sung in harmony, they're just sung in unison, so they don't have that lovely, what we love about Anglican chant is it's in 4 parts, so you have that delicious harmony where nevertheless can be just strung, it feels elastic being pulled out, filling in spoken word. I mean, I suppose, they're both very good methods for singing the non-scanning words, aren't they? That's the whole point of the Psalms, they don't scan. So you can fit, but you can set it to music by sort of just elongating or staying on the same note for longer if there's a long verse. If peradventure the darkness shall cover me. Is that how it goes? Exactly.
Then shall my night return to day.
Yes, they stay on the same. They might stay on the same.
There's no darkness with thee.
Yes. Oh, delicious. So that's what the whole idea is. unlike hymns. So I didn't. Yes. So the Scottish people wrote the metrical psalter, didn't they? The metrical psalms, like the Lord is my shepherd, I'll not want, is a metrical version of the Lord is my shepherd. And the Scottish people, the Scottish Christians in the 18th century, wanted them to be scanned, so they were all set metrically, and some of them were just so bad when they were metrically set that they came out just really appalling doggerel, really. Some worked well, but some came out as terrible doggerel.
So McGonagall, but they were translated by William McGonagall.
McGonagall into doggerel. Yes.
Into doggerel. So I know that.
Yeah. Mm.
I know that the Calvinists. I want to do a podcast with an American Calvinist whose name I've totally forgotten, but I've got him down my list. I think we're going to do Psalm 20. Mm-hmm. Some put their trust in chariots and some in horses.
Yes.
Which I like because I like horses. But they're really into what they call they pronounce it psalms, and they do. Presumably they do the Scottish chant, do you think?
Well, I don't know. I don't think so. I won't ask them, actually. I don't think they will. I think those are rather sort of hymn booky. You see them in hymn books now. Whether I'd be very interested to know if they do. I think they might just sing a rather modern translation of them. That's my guess. Because they're quite probably more fundamentalist. They want the meaning. They really want to winkle the meaning out of every verse. Whereas we just let the meaning somehow wash over us in this wonderful poetry. And that's, yeah.
Do you know one of my pet hates?
Yes, tell me.
Oh, sorry. No, I'll tell you my pet hate in a moment. Yes, tell me what you want to say.
Well, my pet love is when the 15th evening is sung on BBC Radio 3 on a Wednesday in term time when all the choir is singing. So you have to, the stars have to be aligned for the 15th evening, which is Psalm 78, the best, my favourite psalm really, because it's the second longest. And so it happened in Hereford, I think in December, that amazing thing, it being a Wednesday, it being Radio 3, it being all the choir, it being Psalm 78. I mean, and it takes 20 minutes to sing. So the whole rest of the service has to be short. It takes 20 minutes to sing that psalm. And it has 4 different chants.
Okay. It
changes chants. It's an incredible experience to listen to it. And it has a whole story of, and then God awoke like one out of sleep, and like a giant refreshed with wine. He smote his enemies in the hinder parts. He smoked his enemies in the hinder parts and put them to perpetual shame. So that's a great sort of change of chant, and off you go to the triumph of God over the heathen. It's marvellous.
But he smoked his enemies
in the hinder parts. You can imagine how much the boys loved that when they were singing 1975, the ones I knew.
So he sort of zaps them in the bottoms.
He does. Yeah. Yes, exactly. Isn't it marvellous? So that's what you want. Tell me your pet hate now. If you told me you're my pet love.
Oh, well, one of my pet hates is the version of Psalm 23, the tune that's called Crimond.
Oh, yes. Da, 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 da. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, because...
Why do
you hate it? Yeah. Yeah, well, that's an absolute example of the metrical psalms, the Scottish metrical psalms. That's an absolute prime example. Yeah. So exactly.
It's always good, one has an instinct. Yes. I knew instinctively I hated it, but I didn't know why I hated it.
Well, that was a version of Rockwell. That's one you could say that's one of the better versions. I wish I had it to hand. I'll tell you for your next podcast so you can quote it, an example of a really bad, really, really bad bit of metrical psalm translating. But that the Lord's my shepherd, he makes me down to lie in pastures, that's me, the quiet waters by. I mean, I don't hate it as much as you do, but it is a bit of an emasculation. Whereas the King of Love my shepherd is, and the hymn is more of a reimagining of Psalm 23 rather than a translating of it. So, and to me, that's absolutely beautiful. That thou spreadst, wait a second. Yes, thou spreadst the table in my sight, my ransom grace for spares, and oh, what transport of delight from thy pure chalice floweth. That's to me, that's a reimagining of Psalm 23 rather than your one, Crimond, which is sung to Crimond, which is a doggerel translation of it, I think.
Doggerel translation. Just, yes. I want to just go back a second to that psalm that you love, Psalm 78. You say,
yes, yeah.
Why is it so good? Apart from being the second longest.
Yes, it does go through the whole story. Yes, Hear my law, O my people, incline your ears unto the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will declare hard sentences of old. And then it just sort of goes through the forefathers, and he brought the waters out of the stony rock that he gushed out like the rivers. And then when the Lord heard this, he was wroth. Yes, he's wroth about us doing bad things. And so the fire was kindled in Jacob, and there came out heavy displeasure upon Israel, because they believed not in God. And then he comes and smotes them in the hinder parts. And it just goes from sort of fury to triumph. And the vocabulary is just, I mean, it's no better than any other of the marvellous Coverdale. It's just a particularly stirring 20 minutes. I mean, my favourite song, you know, I would say it's not my favourite, you know, my favourite song. I have different favourite songs, really. I mean, I think, you know, oh my God, Lord, out of the deep have I called unto thee, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Oh, let thine ear consider well the voice of my complaint. I think that's 130. That's, you know, one of my absolute favourites. It's so simple. In a way, I prefer some of the shorter ones. But as a great Anglican experience, going on the 15th evening to a cathedral.
Yes, the idea of learning a psalm that takes 20 minutes to go through. That's going to be hard for you at our age. I mean, it's okay when we were little, but exactly. I learnt I'm 42 that like as the heart desireth the water brooks. I mean, what a beautiful bit of language that is. Like as the heart desireth the water brooks, so longeth my soul after thee, O God. I did learn that one once when I was about 25, but that's not too long. So, but Psalm 51 is not too long either. No, Psalm 51 is
that's the Allegro Miserere, isn't it? That's the Allegro Miserere words. Is that
right? Tell me.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So the Allegro Miserere is sung on Ash Wednesday always in cathedrals, and I always go along to hear it because it's some people that don't like it, but I think it's the most beautiful bit of music by Allegro. It's normally sung in Latin actually, but it is Psalm 51. And
have mercy on me, O God, after thy great goodness.
And it's just sung as your forehead gets ashed, get the cross. This music is swirling in the background. I mean, and it's got that incredibly high note. Is it top C?
Can I tell you a funny story, Ysenda?
Yes.
My brother and sister are also Christians, and on Ash Wednesday, I gathered from my brother's social media posts that he was going to go on some kind of fast. And so I thought, well, because, you know, the Bible's quite big on, the New Testament is quite big on prayer and fasting. And, you know, fasting is as important as prayer. And also, I mean, there are health benefits as well. And I thought, well, you know, maybe I should fast on Ash Wednesday. So I started what was going to be a 36-hour fast. And I looked at my brother's posts, and he posted a picture of himself with the ash cross on it. You know, he'd been to Worcester Cathedral to get ashed. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get out pious by my brother.
Yes.
So I didn't mention that I was going to go on a fast. And by the way, I don't think 36 hours is a big deal at all. That somebody in my gym told me that he's been on a 40-day fast twice.
Correctly.
Now that must be pretty trippy. After
that really must be. Yeah. So what happened to your 36?
So at 5 o'clock, I sort of texted him saying something like, you know, because actually the first day is almost the hardest. You get just grumpy, and, you know, I mean, I think you settle in after a while. But I was saying, you know, how's your fast going? And he said, oh, it's okay. I had a few bits of dried bread and 3 slices of cheese for lunch. And I was thinking, what? This is no. So I didn't say anything. Yeah. I carried on fasting to the next day. And I sent him this message saying, Dick, what was all this about your fast yesterday? When does cheese and dry bread come into it? And he said, oh, the Anglican fasts are much less demanding than the Catholic one.
Yes. So it didn't really count. Goodness, yes, no, that is true probably. So I've been out to lunch with Catholics on Ash Wednesday and regretted it because I tuck into a croque monsieur and they have nothing or a banana at the absolute most. So don't go out to lots of Catholics on Ash Wednesday.
How much fasting do you have to do as a Catholic, and if as an observant Catholic?
Well, exactly. So I asked my friend Marie in France. She said, honestly, none of her friends do it. They eat one less Mars bar, perhaps, or whatever the equivalent in France is. But yes, I just think that observant Catholics perhaps really do try to eat nothing or just two bananas on Ash Wednesday. And they have fish on Fridays, of course, very much fish on Fridays in Lent. And
apparently Sunday is a feast day.
Yes, exactly. And St. Patrick's Day always happens in the middle of Lent as well, always, which is quite tough for people who are giving up Irish people giving up the booze. Apparently, that's very annoying. And perhaps they let themselves off on St. Patrick's Day.
Well, I mean, they could probably say, well, he's a saint, and if it's good enough for him.
Anyway, so do you love the hymns as much as you love the Psalms, or do you love Anglican? Did you sing a lot?
Yeah, no. Funnily enough, I got haunted recently by a hymn that I'd forgotten that we used to sing when I was at prep school, and I couldn't make head nor tail of it. And I came across it again when I was reading this fascinating critical biography of the works of George Herbert, and it's the one that goes, "Who sweeps the room as for thy laws makes that and the action fine."
Yes, exactly. Who sweeps the room as for thy laws? Exactly that kind of thing. That made us think, what on earth? What's all that about? Yeah.
It was a very weird hymn, but actually, Herbert's poetry is quite condensed and quite. I mean, he's brilliant.
Well, he's brilliant. He's a bit like Coverdale in terms of that use of monosyllables. I mean, look, just single syllable words. I'm just trying to think of examples. But yeah, yes. Sorry, suddenly my mind's gone blank. But yes, so that was one of your non-favourites. Then when you were young,
it was weird. It seemed sort of it had a sort of a jauntiness to it.
Yes,
the tune that it's sung to is very jaunty and jauntiness combined with light incomprehensibility.
Yes,
so it wasn't one of my faves.
No.
I'm basically a product of that classic English public school ethos where I'm sure I'm not the only person who thinks this. My favourites would be probably "I Vow to Thee, My Country." Because it's got a great tune written by Holst, hasn't it?
Yeah, it is extraordinary, and Mark, it is great. Those are great words. Yeah, and
it's in a minor key. Which is always a good thing, I think.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Whereas, so I would prefer that. What is it? Why does one like things in minor keys? Because I think I don't feel the same excitement about All Things Bright and Beautiful, which was presumably written in a major key.
And then I don't particularly like the Psalms, where they have the first half in the minor key, and then halfway through they all change. The chant changes into a lovely major key, and actually it's I'm afraid a bit of an anticlimax. We love our minor things. It chimes with our mood of woe and fear and sadness and despair that the psalm taps into, and I don't want it all to turn into jolly.
Is that an English thing? I mean, Pink Floyd say that quiet desperation is the English way, but I wonder whether this is. I've been thinking about this, and I was wondering whether this is a recent phenomenon, because the 20th century was essentially a cultural invitation to accepting our role as a kind of diminished power, trying to encourage us to sort of believe that the best was past, and that you could have been a contender, you were great once, but now accept it, your country's finished. And I'm not sure that attitude was prevalent in the 19th century when we had a massive empire and we were going places. So I'm just wondering whether this is a relatively recent phenomenon.
I wonder whether Victorians actually preferred those really marvellous triumphant king psalms, all about opening the gates and lift up your heads, all your gates, and be ye lift up your everlasting, and the King of glory shall come in. Perhaps that's what they loved in those days, and perhaps we in our post-war state grew to love the minor key ones. I mean, I think they just jostle along brilliantly side by side.
On that note, what do you make of that hymn, "Lift up your gates, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in"?
Who is the King of glory? The Lord, even the Lord strong and mighty, even the Lord mighty in battle. Da 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 da. I mean, I do love it, but I mean, I'd rather give me a minor key one any day, because I just find those chimes so fully with one's experience. But yes, pretty good. Is that one of the? There are these kingly psalms, aren't there? Glory, kingish ones.
The reason that I'm interested in that psalm, I mean, apart from the fact that it is sort of one of the classics, is that the thing I didn't realise when I was at school, or half realised, because I used to say my prayers and stuff, so that must have put me in good. So I must have been praying to somebody, but I hadn't realised the degree, and I don't know whether you have or not yet, or will, the degree to which all this stuff is real. This is not just sort of made up crazy stuff written by weird guys centuries of millennia ago. This is actually an accurate description of the nature of our relationship with God, who is real and made us. And I'm really going down the rabbit hole here, but I did a podcast, which I haven't put on general release because it's so disturbing and well, I mean, it's very interesting, with a woman who was a mother of darkness. She was one of the kind of the priestesses of Satanism, and it's quite interesting because she got out of it, and because she was lucky enough to have Christian relatives who I think whose blessing when she was younger sort of kind of protected from this. But she was giving me these insights into the. She certainly claims anyway to have been able to communicate with the forces of darkness, and how, about how our relationship with God works, what heaven is, how it looks. And I think it was, who told me that one of the things that God really, really likes, he likes being praised. I
like that.
That it's
yes.
an important part of the deal. You know, you can't, you don't just whine about stuff and ask him for his help.
Yes.
Part of the deal is that you also praise him. But like the stuff about the gates, the everlasting doors are actually real. There are these parts of the world where these portals to the other realm, and that praising God opens them.
I see. Anyway, I like that idea that he likes to be praised.
Make of that what you will.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm reading this fascinating book about a nun who was in a Carmelite community. I'm just reviewing it, and they sing. Of course, they sing the Psalms. I think they have a sort of monthly cycle where they get through the whole Psalter in a month, sometimes even a week. I think in their early Benedictine rule, you got through the whole Psalter. So you just sing. I suppose you were singing 6 offices a day from Lauds to Compline. You would have time to get through the whole cycle of Psalms in a very short time. And again, I feel that's an absolute prop for people who are giving up their whole selves, giving up their own will to go and live in these communities. It's an extraordinary thing to do. And I would have thought that the Psalms just keep you sane almost because they do touch one's joy and despair.
I think they are protective. That they sort of.
I love the idea that God likes to be praised. This poor nun is not allowed to be praised. They're not allowed to ever say anything nice to each other or be nice to each other in this Catholic Carmelite monastery. So that's
really
interesting. God's allowed to be praised, but they're not, poor darlings. I mean, I can't bear it. It's unbelievable loneliness that this woman's going through. It's called Cloistered by Catherine Coldstream. I recommend it.
Okay.
So lucky God, he's allowed to be praised. Whereas the Reverend Mother is, hardly ever says a nice thing to you from decades of your life, because it's not allowed. You're not allowed to be puffed up.
That's interesting.
You're allowed to tickle God's. You're allowed to tickle God's tummy, are you? Yeah. I mean, that's.
Well, I do wonder about this. That what the scriptural evidence is that God actually wants us to
be praised.
Retreat from the world.
Yeah.
Because after all, if he made us in his image and he created this world for our delectation and to give us dominion over it, did he really want to? When you retreat from the world, aren't you in a way shirking your duty to your fellow man?
I just don't understand. I think there is such a thing as a vocation to go into the religious life. Very, very strong calling to retreat and to pray for the world. And these places are, at their best, incredible powerhouses of prayer, which I do feel add to the general, sort of give something to the world incredible. If you're awake in the middle of the night, there's some monk somewhere, 3 a.m, praying the night office for you.
You make a very good point there, actually, and you think about the kings, for example, who was it Henry VI, who endowed these monasteries where they were sort of chantries, where people would pray continually for their souls. I mean, if you believe, and I think any Christian should, if you believe that prayer has a real effect. And the stuff about this in Daniel, for example, about the prayers sort of reaching heaven and enabling the heavenly forces to do their thing. If you believe that the prayer is real, then it does make sense that there should be dedicated people singing psalms. Yes. And also, isn't it a sign of the ongoing war against Christianity that little by little, psalms and religious services of any kind have been taken out of our educational system? Churches, even
it is, yeah. It is. I find that terrifying. The secularization of. I mean, Oxbridge colleges, even where I just think that there's such a secular sort of force in Oxbridge colleges that they don't really treasure this gem that they have in their chapels. I mean, there is in Cambridge there's King's and John's, in Oxford there's New College, Christchurch and Magdalen that have retained the proper choral foundation and services every day, every weekday, and I just feel that needs to be treasured, because if it's gone, it'll never come back, as it hasn't, as it's gone in Italy and France. There's just none of that tradition of singing. None of that.
Is that right?
Oh yeah. If you go to a mass on Sunday morning in an Italian cathedral, you'll get a priest singing into a microphone, and sort of. I mean, you get some very, very good organists in France still, but the choral tradition has died out. Really. I mean, that's a bit mean, because I think some people are trying to bring it back. But there's nothing like what we have here. Nothing like that. And it's
interesting, because. We think,
and we can let it. We'll let ours go overnight if we're not careful.
Yeah, I'd sort of imagined that, because you go into churches in Italy or France, the Catholic countries generally, and you see these pious old ladies, and there's a sort of the whiff of incense and all this kind of Baroque kitsch.
That's all happening. Yes,
sort of. And you imagine that with that would be a choral tradition.
Yeah, no, that really isn't.
It's not there.
No, they sing something. They might sing one very short psalm to a nasty little responsorial psalm where you just repeat. The congregation repeats one verse from it again and again, and someone sings into a microphone. I mean, it really is. It's very, very rare to have anything touching our choral tradition in France or Italy, I'm afraid.
Whereas I went on a trip to Bulgaria a couple of years ago, and I went into Sofia Cathedral.
Yes.
And I don't know whether what I was witnessing, but in part of the church there was a kind of lectern type thing, and these people who were not dressed in ecclesiastical garb, I don't think they were priests. They were kind of members of the public were taking turns to sing something immeasurably beautiful. I don't know what it was, but it was really, really lovely. What would that have been? Do you know?
Well, probably might have been psalms or canticles, or I mean, so was it an Orthodoxish kind of?
It wasn't a church service. It was just it was just going on.
Yeah,
and it was very, very lovely.
How wonderful! I'm so glad to hear that. And I think that the organ tradition in France is very, very strong. So I'm just hoping, and it's just having the choral foundations where cathedrals subsidise the fees of choristers to keep up this incredible tradition is something that just doesn't happen. In America, there's one, St. Thomas's Fifth Avenue. It's the one church in the whole of the United States, I think, that has a row of young choristers who go to a proper choir school, and they're singing psalms to our standards, our required standards.
Okay, so sorry, you explained, and I didn't really take it in. Why? Who funds our choral tradition? Yes,
okay. Well, I was getting a bit cross in the Spectator piece, actually, when I wrote about what's happening in the school supplement, writing about the fact that Canterbury Cathedral has now stopped subsidising its chorus. They used to go to the local. This is very niche, but used to go to the local prep school, get where you got half or three quarters off the fees for your son to give his all to sing in the choir for 5 years.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing. It's a two-way thing. The son gives his time, and sometimes daughters at some schools, such as Salisbury, and the child sings, and it's an amazing two-way thing. But Canterbury's decided that they're going to stop that because they can't afford it. They save £400,000 a year. I think it is a lot because, no,
Ysenda, it's not.
Well, I don't know.
I mean,
and then all the children. Yeah, I know it isn't really. I mean, to me,
Canterbury was originally the prime. The prime cathedral, wasn't it? It was the
number one cathedral, as they call themselves on Twitter, or they used to. So instead of that, all the children get picked from all the local primary schools round about. They come in for they can't make a tiny bit of pocket money, but basically there's no money changes hands, and they just come in from all the local primary schools, which sounds very good on paper, but do they really get that rigorous training they do if they sort of live in and get up 7 and sort of 8 o'clock in the morning, they're all together singing, and they now all the children sing 3 services a week each, the boys and girls, which is some days just not enough to maintain that absolute momentum and high standard that they have at Westminster Abbey, where they still sing 8 services a week, or is it 7, 8? So it's keeping up that professional standard of brilliance, which I suppose you get in gymnasts learning to, or ballet Royal Ballet schools, where you just you're professional at such a young age, and that takes massive training.
Of course it does, and I think you do need a financial incentive. It seems to be quite wrong that this is King's Canterbury.
Actually, no, St Edmunds was the school they went to. St Edmunds was the school the choristers went to. And that's now St Edmunds was suddenly rung up and told that arrangement is now over, and they're not going to fund places for anymore. So that if you want your child to go to sing in Canterbury, they can still go to any school they like, but they just have to come in and there's no fees, no money off the fees if they go there. And so that's it's just a new ratio, and it's happening a lot in England. And some people say it's okay and great, and I get some very cross messages saying it happens fine in St Albans and that you come in from local primary schools. It really can work, but we just have to keep that rigour. And what worries me is that could be in danger of losing that. And that means singing the psalms, regularly. So the language swirls around in your head, and you don't make mistakes. It's just that.
So, I know one hears horror stories of the way that cathedrals around the country are being secularized. They're having all sorts. Oh, I know. With the Canterbury, I'm very cross with them because they had the silent disco last week, didn't they? And then they had on Ash Wednesday, happening Valentine's Day. You'd come in for a day about chatting about romantic poetry rather than about Ash Wednesday. They prioritised Valentine's Day over Ash Wednesday, which was on the same day. And I just feel, what is going on? That's extraordinary.
In our top cathedral, what is going on? They're desperate to get the young people in, but I feel they're going to lose everyone if they start dumbing down in that way. Of course they are. And they have no funding from the government. I do see they need to make it costs, some people say it costs £1,000s a day to run a cathedral. They've got to get that money from somewhere. I do see. So that's the whole question of charging people for entry. It is an agonised world, where they need that money. But the idea that there's been a silent disco in that very nave where you're just about to sing, somehow it sort of infects the air of the cathedral to me, to know that there's been a disco in there the night before.
I don't think we're a Christian country anymore. I mean, famously, before he became king, Prince Charles would say, "I don't want to be defender of the faith. I want to be defender of faith." And by faith, he meant the lot. He meant Islam. He meant everything else.
But he's back down from that. No.
Well,
and I love the church for being inclusive and welcoming people of other faiths, unlike the Catholics, who really don't. For example, as an Anglican, I'm not allowed to take communion in a Catholic church. That sort of
I kind of respect that. In the same way, I quite like the fact that I can't go into a mosque.
No, I suppose so. Anyway, that's getting a bit too theological for me. But because if you were born in India, you would be a Hindu or Buddhist or Muslim. You would just so. It's an accident of birth that we happen to be Christians. It's not. So I can't believe it's the only one true faith, because it's an accident of birth.
I used to think that, but I'm afraid I've become more
fundamentalist. Yes.
So, tell me about. I'm sure I read a piece of yours on boy choristers.
Oh yes, I did. I was getting cross because one by one they're just biting the dust. These boys only top lines. And since then, quite a lot of others have down that route. So there are very few left now that only have boys. My feeling was that I know it does work, and I can be persuaded that there are very good things about it. As a young girl, I would have loved to be able to sing in a cathedral choir, and I wasn't, because I was a girl. And now it's marvellous that girls can as much as boys. And I do think at its best it can work very well. I think in Salisbury Cathedral there are days when the girls sing, days when the boys sing. It's much more complicated to run, because you have to run two top lines. So you almost have to have two directors of music. It's a big undertaking to run, and at its best it can work. I just think just the great model for me is Westminster Abbey, where there's a little choir school. The boys only live there. They sing all the time. The standard is top notch, because they sing seven services a week. And it's just them, and they make an incredible sound. I mean, I do know that if you put someone behind a grill, couldn't tell whether it was girls or boys singing. I think that they can blend well. But I think again it's gone now. It's stopped. I think St Paul's are taking first girls. I mean, I don't want to be anti girl choristers. I'm not.
No, I feel you're apologising too much.
I'm anti any dilution of excellence. And I just worry that excellence gets a bit diluted if people share out the time. They're just they know what. But instead of one lot singing beautifully, two lots sing jolly well. But do they retain that absolute excellence in their psalm singing?
Surely also, I've got sons and daughters. So and my daughter sang, and my sons didn't sing. So I'm sympathetic to the cause of girls singing, and they sing beautifully.
Yeah.
But surely there is an order of difference between the part of the fragility of the boy chorister's voice is the fact that it's going to break at some stage.
Yeah, that's true. Exactly.
There must be physiological differences between a young female voice and a young male voice.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yes, I think that is part of the issue, that boys just don't get that chance. So girls choristers, and lots of choirs such as Winchester do have girls singing all through their teens. So I think cathedrals, when they decide to take girls, make a decision. Either they're going to have the prep school age girls, or they're going to have from 11 to 18. In which case you get teenagers in leggings, turning up for rehearsals, and that's a whole different thing. Whereas boys, there is this fragility, and the fact that their voices break at 11. There is for me something particularly beautiful about a 11-and-a-half-year-old boy's voice, because it has got that fragility. And then of course then they don't have a chance to sing in their teens. They don't have to, so they've only got a 5-year window when they can sing in cathedral choirs, and it seems to me.
Do you reckon you could hear a difference between a boy choir and a girl choir.
Well, I mean, it's rather like Coke and Pepsi. I mean, I really think I could be proved wrong. And apparently, very, very good musicians have got it wrong when they've heard behind a closed door and they can't tell. So, I just like to feel that, like, one can tell that King's College, Cambridge has got that incredible boy sound, which is amazing. And same with Westminster Cathedral, the best Catholic choir.
Which are the ones left? Because I imagine they're dropping like flies.
Yes, I'm afraid they are. Because St Paul's is about to take girls, I think. So it was St Paul's and Westminster Abbey, and I think just Westminster Abbey. So don't put pressure on them to change. I worry that they all feel so pressurised. Same King's Cambridge. There's terrible pressure every Christmas. They say in their Summer Rights, why can't girls sing in King's College choir? So they've done everything they can to start a girls' choir in this sort of in another chapel or church in Cambridge. People are doing, and Westminster has started a girls' choir in St Margaret's, Westminster now, which is a very clever, good idea to make a choir for girls that doesn't actually take any of the absolute excellence of the Abbey.
No. Hang on, how do I have a real aversion to people phoning me on my mobile phone out of the blue.
Do you? Thank God I didn't do that. I switched the volume off mine, but it might go off on the computer. So exactly, you never know. So that's, and then Hereford also have taken girls, and they were one of the last bastions. I think Chichester maybe still has just boys, but I might be wrong. I mean, if it gets a new dean is that that's the floodgates, because it's the old deans that have been around for 20 years that cling on to the old ways. Oh goodness! So we just have to be a bit nervous when
the Church of England, like the Catholic Church, has been so heavily infiltrated by the forces of progressivism.
That was so. I do see that they need to live in the modern age, but I really.
No, they don't. Listen, you see, this is where you and I disagree. Yeah. They really, really don't. The tradition and the Bible are not things that need improving.
No, exactly.
They're really not.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the best hymns are the Victorian ones. And the worship songs just don't. They're so mundane compared with the.
Now you've okay. So here's another of my particular bugbears. Obviously, one of the things that this predatory gay music teacher did at my prep school when he wasn't molesting boys, was he introduced this horrible new service book with a yellow cover. I don't know whether you came across this. I think it was the alternative service book.
Yes, I think so. Yes, yeah. Where all the language was just dumbed out. So tell me what it was like.
But okay. So you had this horrible liturgy.
Yes.
And also you had the thoroughly ghastly, jaunty, modern hymns.
100 hymns for today.
I think many. Were they written in the 1970s? Was there a sort of rash?
I mean, it was "Shine, Jesus, shine, da 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 la 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 la." I mean, exactly. That was absolute classic sort of first worship song. It really got going. I think in the 70s.
I'm not even sure I like Lord of the Dance.
No, exactly. That was number 42 in 100 Hymns for Today, which, remember, that you might have had that little paperback with sort of nasty sort of blood corpuscles down the front. And that was exactly, it was a popular one, wasn't it? But I didn't like it. My grandmother's hymn was in that, which was Lord of All Hopefulness. My grandmother wrote two famous hymns, Lord of All Hopefulness and When a Knight Won His Spurs in the Stories of Old. And I still
did she?
Yes, she did. I cling to those being rather.
But those are good ones.
They're good. She was good. She was brilliant, actually.
I'm not embarrassed to be speaking to the granddaughter of the woman who wrote those hymns. So when did she write those?
Exactly. Well, she wrote. Percy Dearmer was writing his new Songs of Praise hymn book in the early 1930s, and she sat down in her Chelsea flat or house in 1931 and wrote Lord of All Hopefulness, Lord of All Joy, whose trust of a child like no cares could destroy. Absolutely stunning hymn, I think.
Which is in a minor key, I think.
Yes. No, I think it's a major. And then she wrote When a Knight Won His... Being a tomboy, she wrote When a Knight Won His Spurs, because I think she'd been bored stiff in church as a child, and she wanted to write a really good hymn for tomboys. So When a Knight Won His Spurs and the Stories of Old. Yeah, so that's great. Yeah, and so it can be done in the modern age, that's what I'm saying. She's just gone out of copyright, sadly.
1930s is only just in the modern age, I think.
Yes,
I mean, it's not 1970s.
No. She died exactly 70 years ago, so sadly, because I've gone quite well out of those hymns, actually. I've got quite decent royalties twice a year from Lord of All Hopefulness, particularly, which is hugely popular all over the world and published in American hymn books the whole time. But that's all ending.
You get royalties?
Oh, yeah, just until now, I'm afraid. It's just dried up because she's 70 years. She died in 1953.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
What's the mechanism for paying out royalties on hymns?
Yes, I mean, amazing. OUP, Oxford Union Press, twice a year, we get a lovely statement. And some less well-known hymns, such as When Stephen, Full of Power and Grace, gets £1.79, and Lord of All Hopefulness gets, 5,682, which we share out among a few of her grandchildren.
How many grandchildren?
There are 3 beneficiaries, so I mean, it really helps at Christmas. Really helps at Christmas. It comes out the 11th of December, this lovely... Thank you, Jan. Thank you for your morning of inspiration in 1931, because that really has helped us.
Oh, well, good on her. So,
I mean, I can't... We sang
when
it...
was
Yeah. And I mean, the end... The way that hymn just goes through a day, Lord, at the morn of the day, at the noon of the day, at the eve of the day, at the end of the day, it's a kind of metaphor for life. It's an incredible bit of poetry, really, and verse. And she was a poet, actually. And some say that... the best hymns are written by poets. Some say that hymns mustn't be written by poets because they try too hard, and that the best hymns are written by ordinary Anglican vicars on rainy Sunday afternoons in 1871, sitting in their study, who just wrote some of the most sublime, casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea. Just wrote them for their own flock, not too airy fairy. Hymns are not
casting down their golden crowns. That's Whittier. Was that the tune?
Around the glassy sea, yes. Holy, holy, holy. Yeah, exactly. Lord God Almighty.
Is it Whittier?
What, is that the name of the tune?
Oh, no, the author,
yes.
Whittier.
Oh, it might be, actually. It might. I don't actually know on my heart who wrote those words.
Do you know,
yes. But there's usually some vicar, some unheard of vicar who gave that often free of charge, handed it over to the new 100 hymns, ancient and modern, to be for the glory of God. And we could they believe that those words are all going around in our heads 150 years later?
The reason that I may be right is that you remember when you're singing these hymns, you're kind of singing them again and again and again.
Yeah, you start looking
and your eyes drawn to. Yeah, you just sort of you take it in.
You do, in a way, especially during the sermon. There's nothing else to do. You have to just flick through the hymn book endlessly, don't you? And read who wrote everything. And yeah, you do. You just have to endlessly flick through the hymn book. And you have to read, a man may not marry his father's sisters. Do you remember that bit? There's always that amazing list of who a man may not marry, and a woman may not marry her husband's father's brothers. That was passed the time during the sermon. But yes, I'm not surprised.
What's your favourite? What are your favourite hymns?
Well, I think the King of Love, the King of Love, my shepherd is, whose goodness faileth never, which is one I mentioned. That is one of my favourites. I quite like I Bind Unto Myself Today, which is a good minor key one.
Don't know that one. Do I?
And I have to choose my grandmother's, of course. Lord of All Hopefulness is absolute must have at any wedding and funeral. Yeah. So that plus choice of favourite psalms, and the Nunc Dimittis, of course, is one of my favourite bits of one of the favourite canticles. Lord, now lettest thou thy servant depart in peace. What are your favourite hymns?
Well, so I had an insight the other day that when you start learning the Psalms, when you become familiar with them, you realise how much of the liturgy and how many hymns are basically rip-offs of the Psalms. They've just cherry-picked the Psalms. They've taken out these attractive lines.
Exactly, like Handel's Messiah is all Psalm 2, isn't it? Why do the nations so furiously rage together? I mean, Handel
just... people imagine a vain thing.
Yeah.
The kings of the earth stand up and the rulers take counsel against the Lord.
So we know it all from the Messiah. Yeah, exactly. So I think, yes, actually, hymn writers probably did get their inspiration from Psalms, which can be a bit... And then make them too scanning for your liking.
There's a line from I Vow to Thee, My Country, which we've established. Obviously, the reason it's so good is really the tune by Holst. there's a line he's ripped off, if that's not too cruel a way of putting it, from Proverbs 3. Now, what is it? It's and her ways are ways of gentleness, and all her paths are peace.
Okay, so
and in the original, it's a different word.
Ooh, yes,
and it's a better word. And I'm trying to remember what that word is.
But that has got that slightly psalm-like parallelism, hasn't it? Ways of gentleness and all her paths are peace. That's got that psalm-like first half echoing the second half. Second half echoing the first half.
You know what? I'm going to have to look it up now because hang on. Proverbs 3. KJV, because obviously that's
KJV rather than
her ways are ways of pleasantness. And all her paths of peace. Now, I think that pleasantness is a better word. I think he's opted for the wrong word.
I see.
Gentleness.
Yes.
It's like...
Yes, I see. It's a bit soft as my... Yeah. Yes, I know. As my grandmother said, mildness would never have become one of the Christian virtues if hymn writers had not been at a loss for a rhyme to child.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so that's a danger.
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. Although it wasn't for the sake of rhyme that he was putting gentleness in. I agree. So it was a strange choice. Yeah, to put gentleness and take pleasantness out.
Did Mary want to be a mother mild?
Well, I know exactly.
When was that part of the deal?
I quite agree. That's just what Jan's brother, my grandmother, said. So we have to be careful with rhymes.
So I like, just to continue this theme, I like Vatid in My Country. I also quite like the sort of the martial nature of "O valiant hearts, who to their glory came." But I've had a shift in my. I mean, you may have gathered from some of the hints I've offered that I've had a complete shift in my understanding of the world. At my school, and I think it was not untypical of English public schools. The key service of the year was not Easter. Well, it wouldn't be Easter because Easter takes place in the school holidays. It was the memorial, you know, the Remembrance Day.
Oh, I see.
Remembrance Day.
Yeah.
And solemnly commemorated with the bugle blowing on top of the big school and the minute silence and all that, and
reciting the names of
And I thought at the time it was about honouring the dead, which, and you know, they deserve to be honoured. But actually, I also think now it was the celebration of a kind of death cult, that we were being instilled in the state of mind whereby you thought it was a good thing to go and die in a war organised for your benefit by old people who were willing to sacrifice you in either Flanders or you know, in Singapore or wherever. I've become completely cynical about
what that was all about.
War generally, the origins of wars, who they're really arranged for. And they're definitely not arranged for the interests of brave young men at private schools or elsewhere. We are just the blood sacrifice. We are. I think it's so. I feel awkward now praising hymns which I think actually were sort of part of the brainwashing thing. I'll tell you my favourite. Ysenda. Obviously, you can probably guess because it's every Englishman's of a certain class's favourite hymn.
Yeah.
You know, because we sing it, and it's got a tune by Parry.
Wait a second. Tell me, just give me one word from the first line.
And.
Another word.
And. Did.
Those feet. So that's the end of term hymn. End of term. Yeah, end of summer term.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and then people singing...
So it's end of term, but it's...
People singing Chariots of Fire because the film had just come out, and I still listen out for that mistake, don't you? And luckily we've gone back to Chariot now. But there was a terrible time when people used to sing Being Chariots of Fire when that film came out.
That's interesting. Probably the film was designed to subvert the hymn, as everything
maybe it
is
was, exactly.
in popular
no, it's
culture.
amazing, and it has that different. So the second verse starts bring with the long minim rather than and exactly. It is fantastic. So exactly, Parry and Blake. Yeah, I mean, what an amazing pairing. Yeah,
it's a good combination. It's kind of trippy.
Yeah, the atmosphere of end of term, after exams, doors opening. I think my book British Summertime Begins, which all about the school summer holidays, opened with the end of summer term sort of euphoria, when people started painting the headmistresses West Highland white pink. People started doing really naughty things, and they're sort of singing that hymn on the final day. You just got your report, and you had to just gone through your report with your house tutor, whatever it was, and then you sang that hymn, and then you were out, and that amazing sense of freedom. Exactly, it is absolutely like the most glorious tonic of life. Yes, I'm not surprised that has very good associations for you. But I like 40 Days and 40 Nights, and 40 Days and 40 Nights Thou wast tempted in the wild, which is
I love that one.
Which is,
is it 40 Days and 40 Nights Thou was fasting in the wild?
Yes, I was fasting in the wild. Yes, and 40 Nights tempted and yet undefiled.
Tempted and yet reconciled.
Yes, undefiled.
Or was it undefiled? Is
yes,
right?
Yeah. That's now good. Yeah, you see, good old Lenten hymns are just so beautiful because they're just plain bread, brown bread with no jam.
Just going back to your, I think you've put your finger on something there about that end of term thing. Do you think that this is an experience just of people who've been privately educated? Because I mean, not that I'm looking down on state schools, but they didn't have the experience of being incarcerated away from their parents for 3 or 4 week stretches, but without seeing them.
They used to sing hymns in assembly every day, but I really feel that's gone, and that again is a real loss. Not so much of the Christianity, although that is a loss. But it's the vocabulary. They're just not learning those amazing words. 40 Days and 40 Nights, which just again sing in one's head and enrich one's vocabulary and teach one the art of using words well. So that does seem sad. I think they do have assembly, don't they? But I think they might just sing a song, or I don't think they sing what we call a hymn.
I can't imagine them singing Jerusalem.
No, I really can't.
The state schools. I mean, they have to be one of those kind of that one that like the one that Catherine Burblesing runs. I imagine they might do Jerusalem as an act of defiance.
Yeah,
but
so I just I think they do understand. They don't.
The other thing I like about Jerusalem is that you know the story. You know the legend that inspired it.
Tell me.
Well, Joseph of Arimathea was Jesus's great uncle, and he was the richest man, or one of the richest men. He was a shipping magnate, and he was in charge of the copper trade. So he would send out. I think he lived in. I think he had a palace in Ramallah, and he sent out his fleets to Cornwall, which was where the sorry, did I say copper? I meant tin mining trade. And the sort of Blake is riffing on this rumor, whatever you want to call it, that Jesus as a young man may have gone out to Cornwall on with his uncle's fleets and actually did those things in ancient walk upon England's mountains green, probably Glastonbury tour.
That's amazing, because I thought years ago that hymn begins with 4 questions, all of which have the answer no. Is what I thought. No, he didn't.
Well, now I'm saying, yes,
he might
maybe.
Have. He might have. He really might have gone to Glastonbury.
He really might have done
in his beardy way, with his sandals on.
Yeah, no, I think it's. I was going to do this. I was tempted to write. I just couldn't get around to doing it. This kind of like a children's TV series, but like Merlin, but with Jesus.
Yes.
and it would be called "And Did Those Feet," where it would be about Jesus's early adventures, and there'd be dragons and there'd be
that was so great. There's a terrible gap. There's a terrible 30-year gap, isn't there, between presentation at the temple and don't see him for 30 years. I mean, it's a real loss. No sense of what he did in this.
It's really frustrating. I would love to. I find this. How
can they lose him for 30 years? I mean, it's
I read the
like
New,
Harry Potter
the
going
New
to Harry
Testament.
Potter going to live with the Dursleys. Yeah.
Yeah.
For all those boring years.
I read the Gospels every evening, and I kind of I wish there were more of it.
Please tell us more, Mark. Just exactly put more in there. They didn't occur to them. We needed to know that. So that's another example of why we do have to write things down, because people will want to know, probably. It's the small details. There's not enough there. It's too thin.
Yeah.
Annoying.
Before we go, I just because I love your essays in the Spectator and in Slightly Fox, which is one of my favourite. I think Slightly Fox is almost my favourite magazine.
It is. It's incredible. It's been going for 20 years now. Yes, and it is marvellous. In that, and it's a place one I can write. You can write about things like hymns. That where else could I have written that piece? I wrote about Angela Brazil girls' school stories, which and writing that sparked me to write Terms and Conditions, the book about girls' boarding schools, and which they took on and published as one of their little Slightly Foxed editions.
Do they sell these books, by the way?
They do, I think. Yeah, they absolutely. Terms and Conditions really took off. And so did Mr. Tibbets' Catholic School, which is the one I wrote first, actually, a little history of a boys' Catholic prep school in London, which again they took on completely on spec. I sent them a few chapters. They said we'd love to publish it, and it did really well. And then because of that they started their plain Foxed editions, which is where they reprint, because they only do a limited edition of 2,000 copies of any book they publish. They officially do a limited edition of 2,000, but that was runaway success, and they had to find a way of making more permanent editions of which they could reprint. So I know they're marvellous, and Gail Perkis, very good editor, very strict, absolutely says no, she doesn't want it, and yes if she does. So I'm glad you're a subscriber. That's good to know.
I'm going to have to. It's one of my ambitions, oddly enough, to write a piece for Slightly Foxed. But we haven't explained. It's this quarterly magazine where people write little essays on books that have fallen out of fashion, or not always. Sometimes you get essays on mainstream.
Yes, books. Anything you love, really. Yeah, 1,800 words, just succinct about how you came to love it and what it's like. Yeah. And we never thought it would do
I've got a book in mind.
Oh, good. Well, do get in touch with them and do it. And would like to. And
I must do that. Well, if you haven't mentioned it, somebody else would. I would actually.
Don't mention it. Okay.
No.
Keep it quiet, but it's an amazing thing. And no, who would have thought it was 20 years later? It's still going, huge success, and we've just been to the 20th anniversary party of this founding quarterly magazine, which has followers all over the world, subscribers all over the world, who love its succinct, elegant essays. So it's a good thing.
But I just wanted to mine whatever remains of that rich seam that from your book on these chaps, mainly chaps, apart from your grandmother being an exception, who wrote these hymns.
Yes.
I mean, did they make any money out of it?
Well, I think that they often really didn't, and they had had quite cushy lives. Those clergy, they weren't as poor as today's clergy. They really had a jolly nice rectory to live in, and a good living. So I think they lots of them did give either the words or the tunes, and gave them to the proprietors who then made quite a lot of money out of it. But I think they did sell millions of copies. But I don't think there was a huge greediness from the writers about wanting their cut. I think they often just gave the hymns or got a tiny amount for them, a small lump sum, and never had any more. And the hymns took off and went into the bloodstream of the whole world. And I love the fact that they were highly educated. They were steeped in Latin from a very early age. That's why their verse was so good. Because their classical education made them very good at keeping vocabulary in check and keeping not splurging out on words. Just you can tell that. And often they were writing hymns exactly as part of their part of their parish life. The hymns Ancient and Modern was invented on a train journey. Some few vicars got together and decided they wanted to make a hymn book that just got all the best hymns together in one volume, and they put an advertisement in the Guardian, apparently, asking for vicars to submit ideas, and they accepted some and rejected others. And
when was this? When did
it sort of 18? I think it was 1850s. I think that's when it first started. Yeah.
Actually, there's all sorts of things I want to ask you. But by the way, I seem to remember that the Archdeacon in the Barchester Chronicles, he gets 5,000 a year.
They're quite well off, I think.
Which must have been. That must have been. What do you think? That'd be about 500,000 now.
God, it must have been, actually. They really did not need the money from those hymns. They really didn't.
No. Oh, I see. Yeah, well, no, but not everyone got to be Archdeacon. But obviously, that was. I don't know how much bishops got paid, but they seem to. The Anglican clergy seem to get pretty richly rewarded in the 19th century. And
now they get so badly rewarded, and that does make me also another subject of conversation, because who would want to do it now? Who don't really have to run 12 parishes?
Well, just people who are no good.
Yeah, well, poor things. They want to be good, and I just think it has become a much, much tougher world. So that's another reason why
they want to be good in a different way. They want to be good by the standards of the 21st century, not the standards of Christian orthodoxy. That's
there are still some good ones left, thank goodness, and some very sound ones. But I agree.
But they're rare, though.
We need to nurture those ones, definitely.
So Hymns Ancient and Modern came out in the 1850s.
Yes.
And the question I wanted to ask you was, I think that we in the Anglican, in the Church of England, have some pretty good hymns. Wesley often read a few classics, and we've mentioned a few of the others. When I've been to Catholic services, is it just because I don't know the hymns that I find them a bit rubbish, or is it because
I think
they haven't got any decent hymns?
They haven't got that hymn tradition. If you notice, you go to a Catholic church, often the congregation just does not sing. They stand there with their mouths shut. They don't sing out like we do. There's a whole different tradition, I think. And I go to the London Oratory quite a lot, which I love, because I love the whole world of it, and I love the liturgy and the choirs. They have beautiful senior choir and junior choir. The hymns are often slightly watered down versions of us, sort of our tunes set to different, rather Catholic-y words. Of course, Cardinal, the one who wrote "Lead Kindly Light," so there were some very good Victorian hymn writers who were Catholics, but I know they don't seem to have quite the same tradition. They're very strong on psalms and singing in Latin.
Well, I don't mind that. I don't. I think Latin Mass is a good thing. The best Catholics are the ones who go to
Is the Pope clamping down on that? Isn't there's Catholics clamping down on Latin?
Well, the Pope isn't Catholic. He's an infiltrator. He's just something else.
Yes, that's a bit worrying.
And okay, well, just bringing it back full circle before we close. The Catholics, do they, when they sing the Psalms, are they any good?
Yes, actually, my favourite Catholic psalm singing is definitely plain song. And the worst kind is responsorial, where they sing a sort of watered down, slightly doggerel version of it. Not to Anglican chant, just to a different, rather pathetic little tune. So I'm afraid that's going on as well in Catholic churches. So I say, no, the Anglican tradition is by far the most robust and the best in terms of culturally.
And it's just an accident of history, or what?
Yes, I don't. What made the Catholics are. I mean, I still think in monasteries, the Catholic monasteries, it's still going on to a very high standard. My son's the organist at Buckfast Abbey in Devon, where the monks still sing the proper psalms, cycle of psalms into plain song every single, not all day, every single day of the week, and that's still carrying on. But in Catholic parishes,
you dropped that in randomly.
Yeah,
he's the organist at Buckfast Abbey.
He is. Yeah, he is. He was the organist.
Is he a Catholic?
No, he's not actually. No, he's Anglican. But he was the organist at Westminster Abbey before that, and now he's gone to Buckfast. And he loves the Catholic liturgy because he loves the authenticity of monks singing divine office. It's something incredibly authentic about the fact that they're not doing it for any kind of money, or they're just doing it purely for God as part of their calling. So to be steeped in that.
But I didn't realise that plain chant required an organ.
Yes, the accompaniment of plain chant on the organ is beautiful because it's very soft. Just change the note, just gently change the note in the middle of the verse. It's a beautiful, beautiful incantatory sound, and that's what he's doing. Not much requirement for organ skills then. If you're just going. No, exactly. No, it's a very subtle, wonderful thing. And then of course they do have proper masses on Sundays with choirs and things, so there's enough for him to do there. So and it's goodbye to the Anglican world for him at the moment.
Ysenda, it's been great talking to you. This is the point where you are free to advertise all the wonderful books you've written and all the if you have a blog or anything. Tell us about.
Well, I mean, my latest book was called Jobs for the Girls. It came out in September. It's the third in my trilogy, really. I say it started with Terms and Conditions about girls' boarding schools. British Summertime Begins, which begins with singing Jerusalem and all about summer holidays and what we did in our wonderfully neglected summers when our parents had no idea where we were. And then I wrote Jobs for the Girls, all about what happened to girls when they were tipped out of those hopeless schools they went to and expected to make their way in the world of secretarial colleges and cordon bleu courses and chalet girling. And then did they manage to become doctors and or nurses? It's a lovely look into that world in the 1960s, 70s, 50s, 60s and 70s. So that's it. Plus writing for the lovely Spectator, of course, which I do love.
Well, I mean this, Ysenda, when I say that when I see your byline, I will always read a piece by you. I think you have a wonderful lightness of touch. I'm always interested by what you're writing, even if it's on a subject that I didn't think I was interested in. So I commend you to my viewers and listeners.
Thank you very, very much, James. And of course, I love your television reviews and watched one day because of you.
Oh, right. Thank you. Well, and thank you very much for my delightful viewers and listeners. If you enjoy my Psalms podcast, please spread the word, and and obviously watch my other podcast too. But I think the Psalms series has a special place in my heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you.